Hello, students. Have you ever wondered how you can snatch your hand away from a hot pan in just the blink of an eye? Today, we're going to explore the body's incredible high-speed communication network that makes this possible, the nervous system.
So here's the plan for our lesson today. We'll start with why our body needs to be so fast. Then we'll look at the body's network. We will meet the star of the show, the neuron. After that, we will trace a message from start to finish, see how it leads to an action, and finally, we'll see what we are going to learn next. All right, let's begin with section 1, a need for speed. Let's start with a very important question. Why is speed so crucial for our survival? Let's go back to that example of the hot pan. Imagine you touch it by mistake. Your hand pulls back instantly, isn't it? There is no pause, no moment where you think, that's hot. I should probably move my hand now. The reaction is immediate. It happens automatically. And this is why that speed is so critical. If we had to rely on our conscious brain for that action, it would be dangerously slow. By the time our brain processed the pain and sent a command to move, we could get a serious burn. To prevent this, our body has a built-in shortcut, a kind of express lane for urgent messages. So this brings us to section 2, where we will explore this incredible information highway, the body's network. This system is called the nervous system. You see, it's a highly organized network of special cells, and these cells are designed for just one purpose, to conduct information as tiny electrical signals, which we call impulses, at very high speeds from one part of the body to another. Now, what's really amazing is that this huge, complex network is built from a single type of building block. You can think of it like Lego bricks. The one basic piece that builds the entire thing is a highly specialized cell called a neuron. So let's move into section 3 and get properly introduced to this very important cell. It's time for us to meet the neuron. The neuron is called the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. Now, what does that mean? Well, structural means it is the brick that builds the entire system, and functional means it is also the worker that does the job, carrying all the information. Every single sight, sound, thought, and command is carried by these amazing cells. So how does information travel through a single neuron? It follows a very strict one-way path. It always begins at the dendrite, which picks up the signal. From there, it passes through the cell body. Then it travels down the long axon as an electrical impulse, all the way to the end, the axon ending. Always remember this path, dendrite to cell body to axon. Let's just pause here for a moment, because this is a golden rule and it's very important. Information is acquired at the dendrite. It travels as an electrical impulse along the axon. And crucially, this flow is always in one direction. It is a one-way highway. The signal can never, ever go backwards. Now that we know the structure, let's look at the very beginning of the process in section 4, the message pathway. How does a message even start its journey? The journey begins with our body's detectors. These are called receptors. These are basically the specialized tips of the dendrites, and their job is to sense information from our surroundings, things we call stimuli. And where do we find these detectors? In our sense organs, of course, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and our skin. Let's take some very simple examples from our daily lives. When you eat sugar, the gustatory receptors on your tongue detect the taste. When you smell an agarbati or an incense stick, the olfactory receptors in your nose detect that smell. And when you touch something hot, it is the receptors in your skin that detect the heat. So what happens the moment a receptor detects a stimulus, like heat? Well, it's like flipping a switch. That detection triggers a tiny chemical reaction right at the tip of the dendrite. And it's this chemical reaction that generates the electrical impulse. It's like it converts the signal from the outside world into the language of the nervous system. All right, so the signal starts and it travels down one neuron. But what happens at the end of the line? How does it pass the message to the next neuron? Or how does it tell a muscle what to do? Let's find out in section 5. Now, here's something students often get confused about. Neurons are not actually wired together like a continuous cable. There is a tiny microscopic gap between the end of one neuron and the beginning of the next one. The electrical impulse cannot just jump across this gap on its own. This gap is called a synapse. You can think of it like this. Imagine you are trying to pass a message to a friend who is standing a little bit away from you. You can't just shout, right? You might have to write it on a piece of paper and throw it across. The synapse requires a similar special delivery system. So, How does the message cross this gap? This is where a very interesting thing happens. When the electrical impulse arrives at the axon ending, it doesn't try to jump. Instead, it triggers the release of some special chemicals. These chemicals float across the synapse, and when they reach the other side, they start a new electrical impulse in the next neuron. And just like that, the message has been successfully delivered. And this chemical process is exactly why the message can only go one way. The chemicals are released from the axon ending, and they are received by the dendrite of the next neuron. This cannot happen in reverse. So this chemical system acts like a one-way valve, making sure that information always flows forward. Eventually, this chain of messages must lead to an action. So the final impulse might not go to another neuron, but it might go directly to a muscle cell. This special connection point between the neuron and the muscle is called the neuromuscular junction. So how does a tiny electrical signal make a whole muscle move? Well, when the impulse arrives, it causes special proteins inside the muscle cell to change their shape and rearrange themselves. This new arrangement of proteins makes the entire muscle cell shorter. And when thousands of these cells shorten all at once, the entire muscle contracts. And that is how we get movement. So there we have it, the complete journey, from a signal being detected to traveling down a neuron, crossing the synapse, and finally causing an action. Let's wrap up by looking at what all of this leads to in our final section. We began our lesson with the question of pulling your hand away from a hot object. We now understand the pathway a nerve impulse takes, but how does the body use this pathway to create those super fast, automatic actions without even involving our conscious thought? The answer to that lies in something called a reflex action, and that is exactly what we will be exploring in our next class. Thank you.